Hello and welcome back to Dukascopy TV. Now, with inflation performing to expectation today, the big story for the Philippine economy this week has been the suggestion by the central bank governor that the institute is ready to cut rates further, in spite of a blooming economy. Luz Lorenzo, head of research at Maybank ATR Kim Eng, is on the phone with me now. Luz, with the Philippine economy hardly in need of support at present, according to an ANZ analyst, talk us through the possible central bank thinking here.
Well, I think what the central bank governor was just saying is that, they will remain accommodative. The monetary policy will remain accommodative. But I don't think an interest rate cut is likely in the near term. The reason for this is because money supply growth is actually quite high. The last data point for money supply growth was 20%, and this is quite high. So there is no further need to increase to cut interest rates. I think at current status, monetary policy is already accommodative enough, even with the low inflation rate.
With the Philippines currently the shining beacon within the Asian economies, are there lessons which others within the region could learn from the BSP? Perhaps similar measures which could be enacted in struggling China, for example, a country whose growth currently diverges significantly from that of the Philippines.
I think, if you had to choose one country that is so much unlike the Philippines, it would be China. And the reason for this is because China is so investment-driven, export-driven, while the Philippines is led by private consumption. Private consumption in the Philippines accounts for almost two-thirds of GDP, while in China it accounts for, I think, about 30 to 40%. So a big difference there. And that is why the Philippines is holding up rather well in this environment, because with a weak global economy, understandably, exports will be down. And since net exports forms a very small portion of Philippine GDP, the country has not been very much affected by the weakness in exports, unlike China, which is very much export-driven. And China, for example, is also has a very high investment rate. And since that has been going on for so many years now, there are diminishing returns being realized from this increased investment. And so it doesn't make sense to continue investing at a very high rate. In contrast, in the Philippines, investment growth has been quite low for many, many years now. One reason being that the government was actually not able to have the resources to spend, which now it is making up for. So government spending is growing quite substantially this year, and I think for the next few years. The combination of high investment plus strong private consumption is really what is driving the Philippine economy. So it's domestic demand, and given that the population is quite large, it is enough to support growth. So I think for other countries that are more export dependent, the move for them would be to go really towards domestic demand-driven policies while the global economy remains weak.
With the central bank acting to shield the Philippine economy from a possible drying up of liquidity as a result of the current EM retreat and impending US tapering, what at present is the biggest threat to the Philippine economy? Has the central bank done enough to protect itself from the Asian regional slowdown, do you think? Or are there signs, the IMF's growth forecast, for example, which indicate a 7% expansion this year before slowing to 6% in 2014, which suggests that this may not be the case?
I think the central bank has done enough to protect the Philippines from the ASEAN slowdown, as is evident from the high 7.8% GDP growth in the first quarter. So on the monetary side, I think monetary policy at this point is appropriate. The IMF growth forecast, which was recently upgraded to 7% from 6%, I think is is achievable. In fact, I have a higher GDP growth forecast this year of 7.5%. I think what would be the threats to growth in the Philippines is that we would tend to look inward too much because of the weak global economy and because domestic demand is supporting growth quite well. Then we might tend to look inwards too much and ignore the potential for export-driven growth. Right now, the Philippines is in a good spot because the economy is domestic driven and not export driven. But that is not always going to be the situation. At some point, the global economy will recover, and then there will be growth to be had from exporting. And I think while that is not yet the case, it is the time for the Philippines to beef up its capacity for exports, so that when the global economy recovers, then we will be ready to support that growth.
And lastly then, with all of this in mind, talk us through the Philippine peso performance and your expectation from the currency moving forward.
The Philippine peso has been appreciating over the last several years, and this is really because the Philippines has a current account surplus, different from other countries in the region that are running current account deficits. This current account surplus is because of the remittances from overseas workers, as well as the growing revenues the country realizes from its services exports, mainly business process outsourcing. So these are reliable sources of foreign exchange to the country. Going forward, I think that the country will maintain its current account surplus, and therefore I think the peso will continue to remain strong. Recently, the peso has depreciated, but this really has to do more with the exit of hot money, portfolio money, because of the talk of tapering in the U.S. But structurally, I think the flows will come back because the economy is strong, and a strong economy attracts foreign investment, portfolio indirect, and that's why going forward, I think the peso will continue to appreciate.
Luz, many thanks for your comments. That's all for now, but click back to Dukascopy TV, where I'll be bringing you a midweek US dollar-themed Targets in Focus interview. Goodbye.